This week, Esquire magazine published an article. I forget the headline was like "Flashback to the top Billboard hits of 1993," and they just ran down all the hit songs from that year. And I thought we could do that for video games.
93 in video games. What was 93? Sonic 2?
So, well, that's what we're going to discuss. Well, come back with me.
Okay.
Yeah. 1993. Yeah. What were you doing? I was 15. When 1993 started, I was finishing up junior high, getting excited to go to high school.
In 1993, I spent 11 and a half months doing meaningless things I don't remember, and then I played Doom because it came out. So that's what I remember about 1993 is the last 2 weeks or so playing Doom.
Justin?
Yeah, a lot of Sega Genesis back then. I was not, when I was very little, I'm younger than you, I was 8 in 93. And the NES era, video games weren't my big thing yet. Like the Sega Genesis was what really, I'm like, that's it. All right, this is going to be my life. So that's my enduring
I'm going to
memory.
play Sega Genesis forever.
Yep, a lot of Road Rash.
I was 12, and I guess I was really into. I think was it Super Nintendo? I guess around then, 93 was that the year?
Oh yeah.
So I was totally into that, and I was also really into Game Boy, and I think that's when I first discovered how awesome boobs are.
Oh, in 93?
Yeah.
How did you discover?
They're just you start looking for those things when you're 12.
It's not the year, it's the man.
Oh, okay, there we are. Okay,
really
I
has
thought there might be something special.
Anyway, as 1993 was beginning, there were hearings on video game violence being held in part because of Mortal Kombat, which had been released the previous year, but became controversial. And
moral panic.
the controversy extended into 1993.
Is this the same year we were yelling about Night Trap, or was that the year before?
That would have been later, because that was Sega CD.
That was also part of these hearings. People were getting really concerned because video games have been around for 20 years at that point, but they were just starting to look realistic.
So this is a really cool thing. You can actually go on C-SPAN's website to this day. Everything that's ever been on C-SPAN is now on C-SPAN's website. You can go back and watch those hearings.
Wow.
They are quite amazing. I've gone and watched quite a bit of them, and it's kind of terrifying to think that just that Joe Lieberman was kind of like a central figure in this whole thing.
Yeah.
Which I'd completely forgotten about.
Your Honor, at one point, a man flew across the stage with lightning bolts and killed another man. We have to stop this.
Or just watching Howard Lincoln, from Nintendo, just throw the entire video game industry under the bus.
Oh yeah.
What did he do?
Oh, he's just like, well, those guys over there at Sega don't care about your children with their inadequate ratings. If I'm about to be sued. This is all facetious. About those guys at Sega doing this, but we at Nintendo, we protect your children.
Yep.
And that was really the tone. Like, this cannot be stood. Your senators, etc. And they just like.
And I mean, the whole thing worked too, because I for a month I saved lunch money. This is no lie. I did not eat lunch for an entire month when I was this age, and I took all the money and I walked down the highway and I bought a copy of Mortal Kombat and I brought it home. My parents,
for Sega Genesis or Super Nintendo?
For Sega Genesis. And because I was one of those people, I learned very early on that the console wars were stupid. And I got the Super Nintendo and then I saved up money and I got the Genesis. And I was like, I need both.
Would that have been Mortal Monday?
Yes, yeah, I remember that specifically. And I brought the game home. And my parents were pissed, and they took it away from me.
Oh.
And I guess they brought it back. I don't know what happened to it. It just disappeared. And then, a couple of weeks later, a friend of mine got it, and I just went to his house and played it every day. And my parents I didn't understand why they were mad at that. The best thing about that is that you look at that game versus what children are playing now, and you're just like, dude, we weren't doing anything wrong.
Yeah.
That's my kids these days moment. That's what makes me feel old. It's like this was the formation of the ESRB. There was no ESRB before that. But Mortal Kombat would have been a rated M, and comparing what that M is like to the M in GTA 5 is insane.
Well,
it's absolutely outrageous.
Mortal Kombat X is coming out in, just a couple months?
And so
compare the original Mortal Kombat to that.
I'm in a situation where I would never let my 12-year-old play an M-rated game, but I played M-rated games when I was 12, and that cognitive dissonance is a little bit hard for me to reconcile, but I explain it away by saying that, games are very, very different now.
It's true. In Q1 of 1993, Star Fox was released for Super Nintendo.
Ooh, a barrel roll.
Yeah, totally. Star Fox is a wonderful game. Did you play a lot of it?
No, I played a ton of it, yeah.
No, I found it a little clunky.
I always loved it as a kid, but I never thought the graphics were amazing. And I know, looking at them now, you're joking, you're laughing. But
I think they look awesome.
No, I think like the art style is
Yeah.
great, but I remember people back then being like, "These are the most realistic graphics ever made." And yeah, we didn't have a lot to work with, and I do appreciate how clean this art style is. But I never thought it was much to look at. Like, it really felt like, playing those old NES games that had fake 3D in them. You know?
This was all like the old Argonaut guys, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it was just the fact that this was happening on a console that made it amazing. And this is the same year that X-Wing came out, and X-Wing looked better than Star Fox.
Yeah. Well, this was also
This is very impressive for the SNES.
This was the origin of a lot of real. It was the first time we started using really sort of like weird gimmicky terms with our games. Like, we started hearing things about the FX chip, and then there was the blast processing on Sega Genesis. And these like buzzwords that you're like, why are we talking about this?
Yeah.
Granted,
FX
there
chip
was
was real.
Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
That's all.
Yeah, that's the thing. Yeah, the FX chip was actually real.
Oh, yeah,
Blast
yeah.
processing didn't exist. That's the difference between them.
Well, the FX chip, it gave us Star Fox. It gave us
Stunt Race
Stunt
FX.
Race FX. There was really just like a handful of games.
A later-
I'm sure I'm missing a few. But
Yoshi's
they were really
Island used
expensive.
a later iteration of it.
yeah, and like Link to the Past when the Triforce comes in and stuff like that.
Actually, that's not the FX chip, I
Really?
don't think. I don't think so.
They were just pulling off polygons like nothing.
I think so, yeah.
Sweet.
Star Fox was awarded Best Shooter of 1993 by EGM.
Well done, EGM.
Obviously, yeah.
That also shows how times have changed. I don't really think of it as a shooter,
Yeah.
like a space fight combat game.
Yeah, I guess that's true.
It's an arcade game to me. I think that's the genre, right?
It really is a technical triumph, though. I
Rail
mean, you look,
shooter.
there's the same guys that did X on the Game Boy, which is like Star Fox on a Game Boy. These
Yeah.
people really could do
Yeah.
some wizardry. I mean, I think you just look and you're like, wow. And it had that effect on me as a kid.
For sure. I mean, looking at it now, that was in '93. That was 2 years before the PS1. And PS1 launch games would look comparable to that. Like, it's pretty incredible.
It's a big year for Nintendo. Kirby's Adventure was released for the NES. It's 1993. This is a very late life NES game.
Not the final NES game,
like-
but it was maybe the last big. I don't even want to use the term
It's
AAA,
just
but like
crazy that Nintendo was like breaking new ground with the Super Nintendo and showcasing this new graphics technology, and still releasing this on the NES. Like, they don't do that anymore. Microsoft has nothing exclusive coming to the Xbox 360.
No,
right?
no.
Kirby's one of the best looking NES games. It's
Oh, it
incredible.
really is, yeah.
It's running on
This
the
game
NES.
is awesome.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. I didn't play it back in the day, though. I had moved on to other things, and it was only like in college several years later when evil emulators appeared that I discovered that this game even existed.
It plays really smooth. I mean, it's really hard to believe that like this in a game like, as big of a Metroid fan as I am, like the game is really clunky, right? Like the jumping's clunky in it, everything's clunky in it. And compare that to a game like Kirby where very, very smooth controls, very gorgeous. Game design had really come a long way in a few short years.
And just look at all the different pinks.
I know. My issue with this game was that it was always too easy. Always. But I mean, it went with the
Kirby
art
games
style.
have always been.
But I
on the
mean, like
easier side, I
you
guess.
could inflate and just fly across the top of every level. And I remember just doing that and being like, "This is dumb."
Well, I've heard it theorized. I don't remember where Nintendo might have had this idea that like the older kids were going to buy the SNES and you were going to like pass it along to like your little brother or something.
Yeah.
And so the game was kind of aimed at that younger
makes
audience.
sense.
They thought that might still be playing the NES. I don't know where I heard that or if there's any truth to it at all, but it kind of makes sense.
It was a cool time that we don't really have anymore, where people are buying games for two systems from the same developer. Like one's past gen and one's current. And like you would buy Link to the Past and then you'd buy Kirby. That's kind of cool.
Yeah. The one that always blows my mind is Super Mario 64 and Super Mario RPG came out the same year.
Wow. Really?
Yeah.
Yep.
that's-
They were
that's
both in
awesome.
'95.
Man.
That's
What a
really
good year for Mario.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In June, Day of the Tentacle was released. That is an awesome adventure game, and we're going to get a chance to play it again when it comes out to PS4, Vita, and PC.
Yeah, Day of the Tentacle's wonderful.
In August, Zelda Link's Awakening came out on Game Boy.
My favorite game of all time.
That's your Link's Awakening's your
100%.
favorite.
Yeah.
Oh,
my
man.
favorite game of all time.
Oh, that ending.
And far and away my favorite Zelda game. But yeah, my single favorite video game ever made.
Did you get teary at the end?
Yeah, this is a dark. People talk about Majora's Mask being this like really dark, morbid Zelda game. No, this is the one that's really like this is a weird, twisted game, and it's like some of the side characters are amazing. There's this awesome thing they do in this game. It's this trading sequence, and not a lot of people really talk about it. But you start with one item, and by the end of the game, you have something completely different. But you've interacted with like 17 different characters.
You run
in
across
game.
the whole world.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean The crux of the entire game is a secret I won't give away, and even though it's a really old game, you should all play it. There's a Game Boy Color version of it as well.
The color dungeon.
That added a color dungeon
Although I
and
don't
full
like the
color
color
packet.
dungeon. Do you like that?
I don't actually don't like that port, and I'll tell you why. And this is very specific. And sorry if I'm hogging your show for a moment.
Fine.
But Link's Awakening on Game Boy had a trick where if you walked from one screen to the next while holding the select button, you could warp to the other side of the screen. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, and not have the sword, right?
Yeah, so it'd be like if I went here, I could jump to Damon's chair just by holding the select button. And then Damon would fly off to the next screen. So when there's all these parts in Zelda games that you can't cross a river or an area yet, and you could basically just like Matrix time warp through that game off of like the 5th screen. So it's really cool. It was infinitely replayable for me because of that.
It's also a ridiculously good-looking Game Boy game. I mean, that thing's running on a Z80.
Yeah.
It's just what they were able to squeeze out of that sucker by that point is really striking. It's got this whole like sort of SNES vibe in black and white. And I don't know how it pulls that off.
Yeah.
It's the first game where Zelda got weird. I mean, I guess Zelda, the franchise was really, really young back then, and for a long time that was relegated to only the handheld Zeldas. Like they were always kind of the weird ones that were riskier, and the console ones played it straight. And then eventually the console ones would get strange too, with stuff like Majora's Mask and Twilight Princess.
That came after A Link to the Past. So that would be the 4th Zelda game. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah, because it did reuse some assets from it, and it had weird things. Like there was another Crane game. I guess that was a weird year for them to use Crane games.
It had referenced Mario.
But
There was a
you
lot
could
of
get
strange.
Chomps in it.
Yoshi.
Kirby was in it.
A
You
Chomp
could actually get a
Yeah.
Yoshi doll in the Crane machine in that game.
You had to, right? Wasn't that one of the trade game items?
Yep.
In August, also, Super Mario All-Stars was released on the Super Nintendo.
Maybe one of the greatest, almost certainly the greatest game cartridge ever released.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Well, there's 2 versions of it, but I think if the one we're talking about is the same one. One of them has Mario 1, 2, 3, the Lost Levels, and
Mario
Super
World.
Mario World.
And that sucker's
some
rare.
versions of that game.
And that was the pack-in
Yeah.
very late in the SNES's lifespan. So it's actually kind of hard to find that cart.
Yeah.
We actually, I don't know if we ran this feature, if we only talked about it, but you and I were actually, and Jose, were looking at the Super Mario World that's on that cart, that's on the cart with 1, 2, 3, and All-Stars is slightly different.
It's weird,
In
right?
like weird random ways, like Mario slides down slopes differently.
And the Luigi sprite is like skinnier instead of being.
That's right,
like,
and so there's weird-
Just
so-
a palette swap of Mario.
There's this weird alternate universe version of Super Mario World that almost no one's ever played.
Yeah.
And it's odd that, I mean, I can't think of an earlier example of a remake, because these were remakes. I mean, they
For
were
1, 2, and 3, yeah.
Yeah, these graphical overhauls and slight changes to the gameplay like you're talking about there. Can you think of an earlier example in console gaming of a game being remade? This is the first time I think somebody just took a classic and said, we're going to give this a contemporary generation treatment and repackage it for a whole new group
An
of
HD
people.
remaster.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to think. They did like bring they put in old arcade games to the NES.
There is that. That's
But they
true.
usually had to go the other direction.
Those were
they had to
usually
make
remakes.
compromises
Yeah.
to get them
If you look at like Double Dragon Arcade
Well,
or
yeah, but I was
Contra.
thinking of older stuff like Galaga.
Oh, sure. There were,
yeah,
well, there
yeah,
were plenty of
yeah.
ports. I mean, but I'm
Yeah.
trying to think of an instance where they actually improved the game. Like we're
Yeah.
gonna. we're gonna-
that's sorry, this is a slightly different point, but it's one of the only versions of Lost Levels that anybody's probably ever played in America, at least.
Yeah, that was actually the only way to play it until then. We were just like, what the hell were they thinking over there?
It's a sign of the times. Like in '93, they're like, yeah, put out 3 of our old games on a cart, sell it to people, 4 of our old games. But now they would sell you all those games individually for $10 each or
Well,
whatever
they
they
did the
cost.
like Master Chief Collection.
Yeah,
That's true.
There's that. Yeah.
or the orange box. But I think now it would be like
I'm thinking about Nintendo.
It would be
I
like
guess.
Nintendo 100% would not do that nowadays. They don't-
There's a good side and a bad side to it. The bad side is, now you got to buy all these games individually, and for every single console you got to rebuy them. But the good side is they're all available. Like there's anytime you buy a Nintendo console and you have nostalgia, or you missed old games. There's hundreds of them that you can just buy and play at any time. You don't need to go track down some weird cart and hope they've released it.
yeah.
I think the guys at Retronauts put a whole show together once where they did nothing but go through compilations like this, just collections, and talk about them. It's a neat one to dig up if you're looking for more on this, and I think it's still floating around the web.
In August '93 was a huge month. That was also the month that Secret of Mana was released on Super Nintendo.
Oh,
Isn't that Max Scoville's favorite game?
Secret
Secret of Evermore is his favorite game.
Secret
I
of
think.
Really?
Another-
Evermore?
Oh, I know I'm speaking for him, but I think it was Evermore. yeah.
Wow. Overmore.
I really liked this game when it first came out, and I'm kind of bummed that there haven't been more excuses for me to play it. I feel like it's been ported a couple times, but not as not as often as some of the other games that they were making at the time. I love the sort of hands-on action RPG stuff.
And the big deal with this, the footage actually doesn't show it, but it was like a multiplayer.
Right.
Which was really cool to play an RPG. It's the way you always wanted to, right? Like you would play games with your friends all the time when you were that age, but you couldn't play RPGs like that.
Yeah,
this was one of the first ones.
And it's a 3-player game with a sort of Zelda-ish vibe.
Yeah.
But I think one of the reasons we don't go back to it as much is because we're not kids anymore, so we're not playing all the time. And to get to the multiplayer stuff, you actually have to play into the game a couple of hours to unlock that.
Isn't that weird?
Yeah, it is, but it wasn't then because it was made for us and we're just sitting there like play, so, but I think that's why people don't go back to it as much. Like if we're going to do a Let's Play on this, we'd have to play for several hours just to unlock the ability to get all 3 characters. And I think that's maybe why it gets revisited less than it could. It's still a wonderful game. Great music. I also love the fact that you can't just sit and whack away with your sword. You've got to let things charge, and so you got to back up, and your guys are really fast and can dodge quickly, and you get out of the way of most threats. And later Mana games became kind of clunky and slow, but Secret of Mana is pretty special. And the Seiken Densetsu 3, the Japanese sequel that never came over here, is also really pretty good. Both of those games are worth playing on.
EGM named Secret of Mana Best RPG of 1993. Also in August, Samurai Showdown was released in arcades.
Ooh.
No W in that. Well, there is the one W, but
No W.
I've been spelling it's SHOD.
Yep.
OWN.
Yep. Like a hoedown.
That's really how they spell
shows.
it?
Yeah.
SHOD.
Yeah.
There's no W in it.
I've been spelling. That's one of those games that I've been
Showdown.
spelling wrong for like 10
Yeah.
years, and then I had this revelation where I'm like, oh, oops.
But it's no wonder if you read the story screens from the Samurai Showdown series, like the misspelling of the title is really the least egregious abuse of English that takes place. So it's wonderful games though. Showdown and especially Showdown 2.
Yeah, but like they seem to like they're not like still being made today the way that Street Fighter and Tekken.
Well,
are,
yeah, but
right?
some of that's that SNK got.
Yeah.
I mean, got gutted.
Yeah.
When Playmore took over.
What,
so that's
what
a
I
lot
found
of it.
surprising is that EGM named Samurai Showdown Game of the Year.
Wow.
That's
Well, this was the
I was
fighting
going to
game
say,
era,
EGM was on a pretty good hot streak until right there. You guys are really screwing up over there, EGM.
Well, fighting games were. Think about how
Now I'm sad.
you walked into an arcade in 1993, and it was fighting games and racing games and
And
that
beat
was-
'em ups.
Link's
some beat 'em ups,
Awakening,
yeah.
Secret of Evermore,
Yeah,
forget it.
I know I agree.
Kirbys Adventure.
But it was quite a game.
I do remember how many. That was an amazing time to go to arcades, and there were so many fighting games and beat 'em ups, and all the
well, and then Mortal Kombat spawned a lot of clone violence.
the violent ones
yeah.
like Time Killers. Where you could dismember
Yeah.
people's individual body parts, and
That's
they were
great.
just hopping on one leg with a sword trying to kill you.
That game's so bad. All you had to do was hit all 5 buttons at once, and you would decapitate your
So
opponent.
is it it is a bad game, right?
Yes, it's
Yeah,
terrible.
Okay, because
it's pretty-
I obviously haven't revisited that in any
They're all
capacity.
terrible.
But I do remember playing it in arcades and being like, "This is bad," and people were like, "This is awesome! You can kill a guy by cutting off his legs." And I was like, "Yeah, but it's still bad."
Doesn't make it fun.
No.
Yeah. In September, Myst was released on Mac. First came to Mac. I don't think it came to PC till the following year.
Yeah, actually, I don't think Myst came to PC till like 95.
Oh, really?
Yeah, maybe I'm remembering that wrong. But yeah, but Myst was,
Myst was a phenomenon.
Yeah, it was. Myst was the first time somebody took a CD-ROM. Well, there was Seventh Guest, but that was terrible. But somebody took a CD and was like, how much beauty and great music can we fit on this thing, and how can we show off this incredibly rendered world? And you look back at it now, and it's just, it's a hypercard stack.
One
Yeah.
of the first examples of pre-rendered backgrounds being used really effectively. Not the first example in any game ever. For a long time, Myst was also the best-selling video game ever.
Well, it got packed in with almost every CD-ROM unit
that's
ever
why-
sold. That's a
yeah.
lot of it. But also it was a game that every kind of person played. There was no pressure in Myst, and it was very difficult to die. Really, until the end of the game, you couldn't die. And the puzzles were frustrating and esoteric, but if you really put your head to the wheel, or did something hard, I lost my metaphor, you could figure it out, or you could go buy the strategy guide or talk with your friends about it.
If you put your head to the wheel.
Head to the wheel. If you put
I
your
was going
head
to say that
to the wheel.
Myst is probably one of the most popular, completely bizarre things ever really taken in by our species.
That and Beanie Babies.
Yeah,
which
like-
was also like 93.
But like Beanie Babies, I sort of get, because it's just like, okay, it's an animal full of beads, and don't open it because your house will be a mess. It's a great set of rules. Myst was like, you're on this island, and if you click things in the weirdest ways that make no sense, FMV videos of old men yelling at you will appear.
That's right.
And people are like, oh, I gotta buy that. I'm like, what the hell? Like, it made no sense. It wasn't like you hand a guy a controller to play Mario, and he's like, got got it. Totally makes sense. Or Tetris was like, clear these blocks. But Myst, I still don't understand Myst.
Well, I think a lot of Myst was that exploratory sense. There was no pressure. Anybody could play. There was a game the same guys that did Myst made before Myst called The Manhole, which was just sort of this amalgamation of
a bar in Castro.
There was just sort of this amalgamation of all these different fantasy elements from different stories mixed together. Unlike Myst, there were no puzzles really. So you just wandered around these neat little worlds and heard cool music and neat sounds and met, characters from old fairy tales. And I got that one more. Myst was just that with buffer zones to keep you from getting to the content to stretch it out way longer. But for a lot of people, just that chance to walk through a new world, it was for somebody that didn't want to learn to use a console or that didn't understand the appeal of something like Zelda, it was their Zelda. It was this big open universe they could wander around. And it appealed in a way that particular interface hadn't before.
Did you know there was a parody game called Pissed?
Yeah, and wasn't
yes, I
with
had
John
it.
Goodman.
Yeah,
I think
John
it
Goodman.
came for like a demo for it or something like that. Somehow I played it, and I think it came with like a magazine or something I got. Because back then they just gave away games with magazines like it was nothing.
My favorite thing about Myst
it was called PYST, right?
Yeah, with a Y. The sequel to Myst was called Riven: the sequel to Myst. Like that was the name of the game.
Yeah. Well,
We want to name this something new, but how will people know it's the sequel to Myst?
yeah.
They made
Empire Strikes Back: the sequel to Star Wars.
Exactly. They made 5 of the things.
Yeah, they
5
did.
Myst games?
Yeah,
Really?
Made 5
When was,
of them.
when was the last one?
I didn't play it.
Not that long ago.
Yeah. In fall of '93, there were some notable hardware releases. In October '93, the Panasonic 3DO was released.
Did any of you guys have a friend that bought it?
Yes, I had.
That was such a
In your childhood?
yeah.
I had a friend who their family always had to get the new high-tech thing, so they had a laser disc,
Jaguar.
a laser player, they had a 3DO. I remember playing The Horde starring Kirk Cameron.
Oh,
Yeah.
that is unfortunate. Oh,
Yeah, I had a friend who got the Neo Geo. God,
I love the 90s.
I totally remember that commercial. Oh my God,
It looks like the trailer to Strafe. It's just awesome.
and that was like I remember seeing that commercial and then going to run in the other room to talk to my dad. But halfway in between going there, I was just like, I don't really know if I want that.
Yeah.
Like be like, I gotta get. Actually, no, I don't think I need that.
Okay, so it was ridiculously expensive, but it did have a couple of good games. I know Return Fire was really good. Have you ever played Return Fire?
I don't remember. I don't
To
know.
this
Maybe.
day, Return Fire is fun. It's a 2-player game. You got to have a friend for it to be fun. Had a pretty good version of Super Street Fighter. A couple other things. It had Dungeons and Dragons Slayer, which justifies the existence of that console all by itself. It was like it was a first-person RPG that looked like Doom and was based on the D&D universe, where like pixely treants would beat you in the face.
Yeah.
I love that game.
Well, it was such a weird era because it was like the video game industry had crashed and then Nintendo sort of Trojan horsed their way back in, and then Sega was like, oh, we're gonna get up in this, and then everyone was like, we can make a console too, and it was like Philips CDI and Panasonic 3DO and every single.
It was a minefield if you were like...
It was like, then the Atari Jaguar, which my friend had, and the controller was like this big and had 100 buttons on it.
And it's like, God help you if you were a kid and you made the wrong bet.
Oh yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Most of those kids are in prison now.
Anybody
If
who
you
bought a
picked the wrong
CDI is-
console, you had a bad outlook on life and you're in jail now.
Yeah.
Not for that, but because it led to other bad decisions like
It was
drugs
like bad
and murder.
enough. Like I was a Genesis kid growing up, and it was bad enough that I couldn't play, the Final Fantasies and the Zeldas. Like if you only had a 3DO,
Oh man.
Yeah, you were sad.
No, because there was like you could go to school armed with like I played Comic Zone last night. It was awesome. Or I played X-Men for Genesis. It was amazing. Nintendo babies don't have that. But nobody came to school like, oh man, I had a really good time playing Clay Wars last night. The 3DO.
you mean Clay Fighter? No, Clay Wars.
No, Clay Wars. It's about these clay tanks.
It was a neat idea. They had this idea that they were going to license the hardware.
Trip Hawkins?
Yeah, it was Trip Hawkins, and it wasn't like just the Panasonic 3DO. We called that, but several people manufactured it. Like anybody could make a 3DO that wanted to.
Yeah.
It was just a hardware standard. The problem was that
What does that even mean? That's crazy.
it's sort of like a PC. Like
Yeah.
it was an open architecture, and they're like, okay, and everybody will want to make their
Like
own.
people making Blu-ray players.
Yeah.
It's
crazy.
It was a neat, terrible idea. Like just a horrible business model.
And these things weren't cheap. They were all pretty
I think
expensive.
it's like $700.
Yeah. I think they're
Ridiculously expensive.
Also in October, 8 years later, Nintendo redesigned the NES.
Oh yeah,
With
I
the
bought
NES
that.
101.
The top loader, right?
Yeah. The
See,
top
that's what I
loading
was saying
system.
before about how I was still playing NES games. This was one
How
of the
great is this
reasons.
Japanese commercial, by the way?
Everyone's like off model.
They're all in there. Just
Yeah. But
man.
yeah, I mean, it's just crazy. It was the NES had been around for so long at this point.
I loved the design of this system. It hasn't held up.
I never had this design, but they were trying to make it look more like the Super Nintendo because it had the controllers
and
have
the
the rounded edges.
controllers. Well, the thing is, if you were still playing NES games then, which a lot of people were, you almost had to buy that thing. Because
Yeah,
A, it was
it's
dirt
just-
cheap, and
yeah.
B, your old system was dead.
Was broken
Like
by
my
then.
NES worked 1 out of 30 times by that year. By '93, I had to put a game inside my NES and another game on top of it to jam it down,
Yeah.
and then slap the side and blow into it and tell it like love stories, whatever you had to do to get it working.
I still have my NES, and it barely works. It's the same as you. I have a whole system. I know its quirks and know how to get it to work, but it's kind of like, realistically, I probably need to just get rid of it and buy those games on the Wii U.
Yeah.
Like, it's time.
I just
Oh, you
if
still have yours hooked up?
Not hooked up, but I own it. Like, it's in my closet.
Wow, that's
I don't know
impressive.
why. Like, I don't know who. Never in a million years is that thing going to get drug out. Actually, now that I don't know if I've mentioned this on GameScoop, but I'm a father now.
really.
Congrats.
And so maybe when she's like, 4, I'll drag out the NES and we'll have fun for an hour.
I know I'm going to get angry letters for this, but I've had good luck with the Retron 5, honestly. You can still plug NES
I don't
controllers
think
into
anybody's
it.
going to be mad about
There's
it.
some emulation controversy with it.
Yeah, there is. But I've had good luck with mine, and it outputs to HDMI very nicely and is affordable. I like it quite a bit.
In November, the Atari Jaguar was released. So I think this is interesting. The Super Nintendo and Genesis had been out for a few years at this point. And so now like the 3DO and the
These
Jaguar
commercials.
were coming out. This was supposed to be like the new wave of consoles, and they were both complete failures.
Yeah.
They were. Although this did give us Alien versus Predator.
But I did love what the Jaguar did, and the
2000.
most important thing the Jaguar did was it ended the bit discussions. Because we had talked about 8-bit and 16-bit, and you saw in their marketing campaign, 64 bits, and all of a sudden,
Do the math.
like everyone came together, every person fighting in the cafeteria, and every troll and nerd all got together at the same time, and we said, bits don't matter, games do, and it was such an important revelation, and it took the Jaguar to come in, making that gigantic piece of junk with that horrible controller with no good games, selling it for hundreds of dollars for us to go, we don't care about bits.
Yeah. That Do the Math ad campaign 100% almost worked on me.
Yeah.
I'm like, it is
it
more
really?
bits.
I did the math.
It's twice as many bits.
As a kid, I saw that controller and I was like, whoa, more buttons.
Yeah.
I can do more things. But
Felt the same way.
sanity prevailed in the end. That sucker shipped with that old style, like sliding bar adapter for your TV. Do you remember that the manual switch? It still came with one of those in the box, the Jaguar
wow.
did. Yeah, even here in the early 90s, it came with one of those like old style Atari 2600 adapters. to
I
plug into
hated
your TV.
their branding was so aggressively ugly too. It was this. It looked like a cat was
scrap
scratching through
marks.
a box.
Yeah.
With the eyes.
But there were 2 good games for the thing at least. There was Alien vs. Predator.
Yeah, which
is-
I actually, a friend of mine had. My only memory of Jaguar is a friend of mine had it, and he also had. Do you remember Kinects?
yeah, I remember.
They're
that.
the
Sure.
little intricate sticks
Yeah.
that you put together.
Yeah.
He had the roller coaster, which was the size of the
That's-
set.
Yeah.
And I went to his house, and his bedroom was a Jaguar and the Kinects roller coaster. And we hung out like 3 times, and I was like, this guy's weird. I'm never hanging out with this guy again.
Atari's final piece of hardware. The Jaguar, wasn't it?
They had the Jaguar CD, but
Ooh, that,
They made
which,
those-
which
they
was
made-
literally shaped like a toilet lid.
Yeah.
Like a toilet bowl. I mean,
Yeah, it
just
was.
awful. It's just horrible. But the other good game, Tempest 2000.
That's
That was a
right.
good game.
Yep, that's
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
In November, Sonic CD was released.
so good, in my opinion, the greatest 2D Sonic.
I know a lot of people really liked
The
that game.
soundtrack's so good. Both soundtracks are so good. That's what people don't know, is that game had a separate soundtrack in Japan and America. And I don't exactly, there must have been some legal reason why. I don't know the story behind that. But they're both like incredible. It's like a weird parallel universe Sonic CD soundtrack. I had a Sega CD, and so I was trying to like justify its existence. I'm like, no, guys, Sewer Shark, it's super legit. But then like Sonic CD was really 3 versions of every level going to the past, the present, and the future.
Yeah.
Game was great.
That
So
was, I
I-
agree with you. Go ahead.
No, I played that game last weekend out of
Yeah.
nowhere because I have one of those like Kindle Fire TV sticks.
Yeah, and that game's
and
on there?
It's on there, and you can play it with like an Amazon controller. And I was just like, why is this here? Like, because you know how like when you go on your iPad, there's all these games, and you're like, wow, there's all these.
Because it's on
classics.
the App Store, but no one who wants that.
But on the Kindle game App Store, it's a wasteland.
Never underestimate the ability of Sega to port Sonic to crap. I mean, they had
Yeah.
a version of Sonic. I kid you. Do you remember the whole wheel iPod that used to exist?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
With like the control wheel. They had a version of Sonic for that.
Yeah, you used to write
revol-
about those games, right?
I reviewed Clickwheel iPod games.
Wow, that's amazing.
So I played Sonic CD, and first of all, yeah, it is the best Sonic game. Second of all, Sonic games are terrible.
Yeah.
I guess that's a good point. If
The best of the terrible series.
Yeah.
I said it's the best 2D Sonic, then I guess that makes it the best Sonic by default.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I wonder now I'm super curious about which soundtrack is in the modern version of the game.
But the parts where they go, the future is hilarious in that. Go look those up. Go play that if you can. The parts where Sonic goes to the future, there, like their vision of the future is worse and more demented than any other vision of the future.
It's really post-apocalyptic. Everything's all